bones embedded in the ground. They aren't always silent. Sometimes they scream of agony, of desperate struggles for survival. I've seen fossils that tell stories far beyond just scientific data. Stories of truly brutal and tragic endings. I keep thinking about the Centrosaurus herd. A torrential downpour turned their world into a nightmare of mud and raging water, leading to a mass drowning. I imagine them, moving together as they always did, a mass of prehistoric life in perfect synchronization. Then the rain came. The place where this happened is now known as the Drowning Cemetery. The Centrosaurus were medium-sized herbivores living in the late Cretaceous period, around 76 million years ago. They had a large nasal horn and an impressive frill. They were symbols of power, but maybe also victims of their own evolution. These creatures meet about 6 meters in length and weighed over 2 tons. They were adapted to living in groups, and it was precisely that group dynamic that sealed their fate on that day. The site of their discovery, in southern Alberta, Canada, is one of the largest fossil concentrations ever found. It was once a floodplain near an ancient river, but it became a collective grave for an entire herd. The rain came down in sheets. In just hours, the water transformed everything into chaos. Mud, raging currents, despair. The ground became saturated and unstable, beginning to collapse. The Centrosaurus, caught completely off guard, tried to flee. But the mass escape only created more destruction. Those at the front were the first to fall, trampled by their panicked companions. Others were swept away by the flood, dragged into lower areas where they were buried alive by the mud. Some, the younger ones, or those already weakened, simply couldn't keep up. Death came swiftly for some, but for others, it was slow and agonizing. What was left was a tangled mass of bodies, compressed under tons of flesh, bone, and earth. And then silence. Decomposition gave way to fossilization. Horror transformed into geological record. Millions of years later, humans would come to excavate that soil using brushes, spatulas, with a patience that mirrored the passage of time itself. Paleontologists eventually revealed an unprecedented discovery: more than 10,000 bones belonging to a single species in a single location. The Drowning Cemetery had been revealed. The scientists' interpretation was immediate and stark. This wasn't the result of deaths occurring over generations. It was a single event, a sudden catastrophe that wiped out an entire herd. The uniformity of the fossils, the lack of erosion on the bones, and the absence of signs of predation confirmed it. Everything there screamed urgency, desperation, tragedy. Then there's the story of the Triceratops with the infected bite. I try to picture this animal, more than 9 meters long, weighing up to 12 tons, slowly walking across the plains of a lost world. Triceratops horridus, they called it. With 3 sharp horns on its face and a protective bony frill, this giant herbivore was one of the last dinosaurs on Earth before the mass extinction about 66 million years ago. But one particular fossil tells a dark story marked by pain, survival, and violence. What caught paleontologists' attention was a well-preserved skull, but even more so, perforations in vulnerable areas of the facial bone. These perforations, when analyzed, revealed a specific pattern: curvature, spacing, and depth, compatible with only one creature of that time, Tyrannosaurus rex. The powerful jaws of this predator could exert a force of more than 5 tons, enough to crush bone and tear away chunks of flesh. But what makes this case so intriguing is that the Triceratops didn't die at the moment of the attack. The bone surrounding the perforations shows clear signs of irregular growth, a biological reaction, the body's attempt to heal. It was an inflamed bone callus, typical of infection. This Triceratops survived. This changes the traditional narrative of the late Cretaceous food chain. Instead of a simple predation scene, we see a more complex drama: attack, survival, infection, continuous pain, and finally, a slow death. The skull becomes a witness not only to a brutal fight, but also to the resilience of a wounded animal struggling to carry on. The infection that settled into the perforations of the skull was severe. The disorganized bone growth indicates that the body reacted however it could. This inflammatory response is a clear sign that it lived for weeks, perhaps even months, after the attack. Every movement of the jaw, every bite of leaves or branches must have caused excruciating pain. And finally, there's the fossil of the Protoceratops versus Velociraptor. In the heart of the Gobi Desert, one of the most inhospitable regions on Earth, lies one of the most dramatic testimonies of the age of dinosaurs. A moment frozen more than 70 million years ago, where life and death became intertwined in a fierce dance. This is the fossil known as the fighting dinosaurs, Protoceratops versus Velociraptor. Two names, two destinies sealed in a confrontation as brutal as it was intimate. On one side, Protoceratops, a medium-sized herbivore with a large bony frill and a beak sharp as scissors. I've always been drawn to the moments when time seems to pause, when the raw ferocity of nature is captured in a single, frozen frame. And few fossils speak to this quite like the fighting dinosaurs specimen. A Velociraptor, leg raised, claw extended, locked in mortal combat with a Protoceratops. Its jaws clamped tight on the raptor's arm. Neither would survive. It's an extraordinary testament to a struggle for survival, preserved perfectly in sand, as if time itself had stopped to record it. In the arid lands of what would become Montana, about 66 million years ago, another brutal confrontation reached its end. It involved the apex predator, the Tyrannosaurus rex. This particular rex, now known as Pex rex, met its end in a shocking way. Its fossil tells a story unlike any other. When scientists analyzed the skeleton, they found a massive puncture wound in the neck, precisely where vital arteries, the trachea, and the muscles supporting the head were located. It was as if a spear had been driven with devastating force into the animal's vital systems. But this spear wasn't metal. It was bone, the horn of a Triceratops. I can almost picture the scene paleontologists have pieced together. A close-quarters confrontation, a decisive strike, a hunting attempt gone wrong. The greatest terrestrial predator of its time became the prey. Bone fragments around the puncture suggest the impact was so deep it pierced soft tissues and blood vessels, and likely perforated the trachea. There were no signs of healing, which means the blow was fatal, or, at the very least, the direct cause of death. This fossil, discovered in 1997 and nicknamed Pex rex, continues to fascinate both scientists and the public because of its story, its violent end, and the silent message written into every shattered bone. Then there are the mass group deaths. In many parts of the world, paleontologists have unearthed true dinosaur cemeteries, skeletons tangled together as if the animals died trying to escape. They tried to flee, to survive, but there wasn't time. Sandstorms, violent floods, mudslides, sudden, merciless natural forces transformed the landscape in the blink of an eye. Those who lived there were swallowed alive by the very environment they once called home. These fossil sites reveal something rare: moments of prehistoric life frozen in time, not in isolation, but in community. Entire dinosaur families, from juveniles to adults, preserved side by side, their deaths bearing witness to an instant of collective panic. These weren't natural deaths, isolated or spread out over time. They were sudden, catastrophic moments when nature turned against its own children with devastating fury. In China's Yixian Formation, entire groups of Psittacosaurus, small bipedal herbivores, have been found piled together in layers of volcanic sediment, suggesting they were buried alive by ash from a sudden eruption. In Mongolia, sandstorms engulfed dinosaurs mid-motion, their poses preserved within the desert, revealing final attempts to escape an inevitable death. And in Madagascar, a mudslide captured an entire group of Majungasaurus, fearsome predators that had no time to fight back. Perhaps a wildfire, a storm, or a predator sparked the terror. In the chaos, they fell, and the weight of tons of flesh and bone turned into a deadly force for the weakest, the most unfortunate. There were juveniles, adults, even hatchlings, all part of a family or social unit wiped out together. These creatures, I learned, likely cared for their young, maybe forming defensive circles like modern elephants. But against blind panic, no defense holds. Not all died instantly. Some fossils show healed fractures, hinting at survival, however brief, with broken bones. Others suffered acute, lethal trauma. Examining the microfractures, the force didn't come from above, as in a landslide, but from all directions, as if crushed within a living, desperate mass. Paleontologists call it herd death, a natural catastrophe that, ironically, preserves fossils so well. Then there's the Carnotaurus with a fractured jaw. Picture this feared predator, a force of nature roaming South America over 70 million years ago. Carnotaurus, meat-eating bull, a large, agile theropod. But even kings have weaknesses. Sometimes a silent fossil tells a story beyond strength and ferocity, a story of pain, struggle, and perhaps defeat. This particular Carnotaurus revealed a mystery in its jaw, a significant, unhealed fracture. The break, clear and deep, compromised the entire side of its mouth, crippling its ability to hunt, feed, survive. Paleontologists immediately recognized the severity. It wasn't superficial. It was a severe rupture in the jawbone, causing extreme pain, making even basic movements difficult. The absence of healing was the first sign. When a bone heals, it shows new tissue, calluses, structural adjustments. But this fossil showed none of that. The fracture was raw, as if it happened just before death. This led to a grim hypothesis. The Carnotaurus died soon after the injury, and if so, the cause might have been starvation. Unable to fully open its jaw, unable to kill prey, it may have slowly wasted away. Imagine its suffering, every bite, every jaw movement sending waves of pain, each step slower, more hesitant, a predator reduced to a shadow, pushed out of territories, abandoned by prey, maybe even its own kind. And then there's the Tyrannosaurus rex, its bones bearing bite marks from another Tyrannosaurus rex. In a landscape fossilized over 66 million years ago, a giant once reigned, Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king. But even kings face challenges. A fossil found in Montana revealed something fascinating: bite marks on its own bones, made by another Tyrannosaurus rex. This discovery, surprising and unsettling, sheds new light on Tyrannosaurus rex behavior. The tooth marks weren't from a smaller predator. They matched the robust, widely spaced teeth of another tyrannosaur. This forces us to reconsider everything. Was it cannibalism? A fierce territorial dispute? Or a meal where opportunity trumped social restraint? Today, we see crocodiles, sharks, even bears engaging in cannibalism when circumstances demand it. Why would it have been any different 66 million years ago? Another, even more dramatic possibility exists. A fight between two Tyrannosaurus rex individuals over territory, mating rights, or perhaps dominance over a kill. And at the conclusion of that confrontation, the victor may have consumed parts of the defeated rival. This, too, is a behavior observed among modern predators. Wolves, for example, will kill members of rival packs and then feed on them. In this scenario, Tyrannosaurus rex ceases to be merely a killing machine. It becomes an animal with complex social behaviors, where extreme violence was sometimes part of the struggle for survival.